was quite the experience, standing in that vortex in the middle of the church.
You know, this is not playtime. This is really, really important stuff. And it is about the fabric of reality.
I breathed the earth's energies in and my weakened state out. I was off balance and I felt like I was levitating. The tears are rolling down my face even as I speak.
It's the search for meaning. What is this? Why?
It adds a depth of meaning that I never saw before, and at the same time, it reaffirms all the spiritual truths that you've heard.
Just tell me that again. Where you are with your diving into earth energy, and you've been looking at it for a few years now.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years, and I started out basically tracking what Rory calls type 1, type 2 lines, the very small lines, really, like 5 to 8 paces wide and maybe 15 paces wide. And early on, obviously, I was very excited as I tracked these things across Bryn Mawr city centre and through the castle, and found that there's a crossed line at the chapel in the castle, and that many of the other small churches in the area seem to lie on these lines. I then discovered that a lot of the Slavic archaeological sites where they have early Christian churches from that period, 900 to about 1000, all of those lay on energy lines, and the bigger ones seem to lay on intersections of these energy lines. And so I thought I was, there. And then one day, Rory said to me, because I was sort of talking to Rory, and he said, Gary, those small lines are relatively straight. He says, you've got some 90-degree bends, and I suspect that actually you've followed one and out in and another one out. And ego says, nah, don't be daft. So I took a friend back with me. I just got this pal and I said, look, will you come out with me this lunchtime and do a bit of dowsing? He said, a bit of what? I said, a bit of dowsing, And it turned out he could do it. And sure enough, he detected a line that I hadn't. But once he had, I found it. And then I was tracking this other line as well. And this is when I realized, actually Rory's right. I did him an injustice, because he's actually quite right. These lines are pretty straight. And another time he said to me, he says, I've been doing some remote dowsing work, and there's a big line out, a big type 4 line out sort of in your area. If you get a chance, would you go take a look? So I said, yeah. So I drove out. It was COVID time, so, it was pretty dodgy, but I drove like 3 hours. Quite a distance into sort of Bohemia from Moravia. And I arrived at this Albektrica place, and there's a beautiful church and a beautiful cemetery with all these paintings, and you could just feel it's some special place. And I get my rods out, and across the front of the church, I counted 25 paces. And I'm like, wow, 25 paces wide. So I sent Rory a quick email. And I went to have lunch, and when I came back, I got a reply, and he says, no. He says, no, I'm looking for something like 90 paces wide. I'm like, what? 90 paces? Are you joking? So, it's been a constant, it's been discovery from day one, personal discovery. And sure enough, I eventually found this line in the middle of nowhere, as it turned out, down some back lane, farmer's lane, by a pond, 90 paces wide. And I had to count, I counted the paces like maybe 5, 6, 7 times, really carefully to make sure that I wasn't counting multiple lines that, were very close together. And what I discovered was that as soon as I had dowsed this 25 pace wide line and this 90 pace wide line, suddenly I could find them in other places too. It was almost as if you had to kind of attune into it in order to find them. So me being me, I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to stop following these little lines, interesting though they are, and they have some very nice qualities. I think the little lines, when they intersect in a church, very, very nice, positive spiritual energy. But the big lines, they really whack you with a stick when you So this is where it's at. So I start looking for big lines and bumped into a big line, several big lines in a place called Jindřichův Hradec, in relationship to this church there that's an old Templar church. And that's how the Templar line came about. And I discovered that this particular set of type 4 lines, which we called Perun and Mrkoš after two of the Slavic gods, I could track this thing across country, and I could even douse it in the car. I could drive one hand on the wheel, one hand on the stick, and find it. And so I've tracked it pretty much all the way across the country. I've just got a bit to go towards the Polish border. I've got a gap on the other side that I need to revisit, and there's a couple of places where it's a bit of a built-up area, like Trebich, where I want to go street to street and be more accurate about where the line goes. But in the process of mapping this line, about 6-7 months ago, I started to find other 90 pace wide lines.
Right.
And at first I thought, oh, that's okay. You know, there's just a couple more. But actually, I went out to this place called Pustimir, where there's a rotunda from about 1000, a Slavic rotunda. And it's under what was a hill fort called Zelena Hora, and has quite a history. And when I got there, I thought, well, you know, this is really intriguing, and there's so much energy here. And I only visited for like half an hour because I was on my way home from some trip. And sure enough, I found 2 lines. So I thought, okay, one day I'll go back. So a few weeks ago, I went back. And of course, I discovered not 1, not 2, but 6 of these lines, all very close together, all running through Pustimir. And then I suddenly realized, you know, I've got lines all over the place. And although I want to finish off working on the Templar, and also I want to backtrack and make sure that it is the Templar all the way along, that I haven't accidentally gone in and followed a different line, which I don't think I did, because these other lines are much more subtle. You know, the Templar hits you with a stick. These other lines are much more subtle. And, you know, I mean, here you are dowsing like crazy, making videos and, you know, even writing the odd book. And then one day you're walking the dog out back and you think, oh, pull the stick out, and you find a pair of 90 pace wide lines within 50 meters of where you're living. And you go, what? How can this be? And then, you know, I find another pair of 90 pace wide lines, 50 meters the other side of my apartment. And you know what? The lines are kind of going east-west, and then all of a sudden they do this, come together and just miss by my apartment.
Right.
I mean, you know, what is this about? And maybe they're supposed to meet at my apartment. I don't know. And
okay.
It goes on and on and on. I mean, you know, and then I start thinking, well, Pustimir, maybe I'm supposed to do something there, because, you know, Rory talks about healing nodes and things like that. And it seems to me that since you've got such a major, significant spiritual site there, that perhaps some of those lines at least should node, and they've kind of just gradually come apart. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go out there when I feel ready in myself, and maybe after talking to you and maybe Rory again, I'm going to go out there and have a crack at, you know, just asking the lines if they want to reset themselves to where they're supposed to be, because I have a funny feeling that they're not in the right place. Yeah.
Yeah. That's go on, keep going.
So I mean, it's gone from you know, a few little lines going through the castle in town to now almost trying to map all the type 4 lines in Moravia, which is going to be a major undertaking. But you see, the geologist in me, you know, geologists map everything. And so I feel as if I've got to map these things. I've got to know where they go. And all these type 4 lines, I started to see that maybe we need to subdivide or subclassify these type 4 lines, because there seem to be 3 different types. There seems to be the Templar line, or the Michael and Mary, where you get 2 polar lines that follow an azimuth, a ley line, and they go through some really rather spectacular places from a spiritual and archaeological perspective. And they do a lot of bending and a lot of crossing. But then I'm finding these other type 4 lines that are very close together. There's maybe a 2 meter gap between them. and it hardly varies, and they go very straight. They're not like a sine wave at all. And they don't seem to pass through anything particularly spectacular. And I can't find any nodes on it. It doesn't seem to node. And then I find in the middle where it's got a little bit of sinuosity, it does node. And where it nodes, it's like a church or an archaeological site. So, you know, I'm wondering, am I looking at 3 different types of line of the same relative width? Or am I looking at a line that's been detected and utilized by previous populations and therefore has been influenced or has influenced the population, whichever way you want to look at it, versus lines which have never really been detected nor known about, and therefore they just go straight? Or maybe the straight ones are, you know, maybe the straight ones were 25 pace wide lines that have expanded because of what's going on with the planet in terms of energy. You know, so I'm where I'm at, to be honest, is nicely confused. especially when you throw in the weird web concept, where these lines seem to have personal meaning. They intersect with my life and the life of other people close to me. It can't be about me. It has to be about everybody. But how that can be is a bit difficult to perceive. I mean, I followed one line, and not only does it go through the apartment, you know, where my daughter was conceived, but also the hospital where she was born, and a number of other sites that are, and the school that she just passed and gained entry to as a high school. And I've also had all these experiences along these lines of strange synchronicities and strange liminal people and butterflies and feathers and goodness knows what. So your head goes, but it's great, and I can't stop doing it. I'm addicted.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Sorry, I don't the floodgates though.
It's fantastic. It's brilliant. I'm going to throw a spanner in the works because, you know, Type 4 lines, the big wide ones, the ones that Rory really loves and has got you chasing, and you're really embedded in them. I've never found one. I've never looked for one. I've never gone up to that size, right? So we'll just park that for the minute, and I you know, admire what Rory does, and it's fascinating, and I you know, part of the reason for wanting to catch up with you is just to kind of lock into what's going on, because I'm feeling a little bit left out of what's going on, because there's some wonderful stuff going on in Earth Energies, and it's like, well, hang on, I want to know what's going on. But right, so your frustration and your delight in it all is it's kind of really touching, but it's also very, very familiar, because it's like when I think when anybody gets the rod out and starts to find the lines and starts to investigate the lines, they absolutely will either dive in and it becomes kind of obsessive, or they're just like, I don't get this, and they walk away, and that's that. But really, you know, most people go, this is fascinating, what is going on here? As Hamish did, bless him, you know, and he spent 10 years of his life chasing the Michael and Mary line across Britain. So you're doing a speedy version of Hamish in your part of the world.
Well, I don't know, it might take me 10 years eventually, because, you know.
Yeah, well, maybe there's other ways of looking at it. And so the Type 4 lines, I have no doubt Rory's correct in that they are subsonic sound. They're generated by sound, and that's what they are. They're manifesting in the ether. And you'll have to forgive me, because you're a man of science. You are a scientist, and you have a very creative way of looking at the world as well. I'm no scientist sitting here, so I try my best to kind of follow some kind of logic, but it falls out the back. So when I talk about ether, I'm talking about, in very general terms, I'm talking about, you know, where I couldn't define what that is. And actually, where I am at the moment is as far as I'm concerned, people trying to identify what these lines are it's a very, very valuable process, but I can't get involved in that because I haven't got the headspace to get in and to analyze logically enough to understand and separate and classify. But the process of classification, I think, is really important at the moment. And so it's really interesting what you're doing and the way you're attaching to it. You said, and it was the video that you cited just now, about the one that is, there's a line going through the place where your daughter was conceived and all of this stuff. It's so personal. That's the one that got me onto your comments going, Gary, come on, man. Come on. We got to talk. Because actually, you said it can't be about me. But I think that there is a level of all of this earth energy that is precisely that for each of us.
Yeah.
And that's where it fits into your worldwide, what do you call it? You call it the worldwide, no, go on.
Oh, the weird web.
The weird web, yeah, your magic from your magic training, right?
Well, the weird web comes from a book called Way of Weird by Brian Bates.
Right.
Quite a well-known book. And it's a fictional account written by an archaeologist of a young Christian, I'm going to call him a monk, but he's a pre-monk, if you know what I mean. He's going to be a monk. And he's sent to Mercia by the king and the Christian king of the kingdom to the south. Sent to Northumberland by the Christian king of the kingdom to the south to investigate the pagan ways in order that they can eventually Christianize. And of course, he has the experience of a lifetime, and he meets the shaman, and the shaman introduces him to these lines of power or force.
Okay.
And it's called the Web of Weird. And so I see this similarity between what's written in this novel / from an archaeological set of documents to what I'm experiencing. And I the Sisters of Weird, the Sisters of Fate spinning the web. And it seems that these lines can be truly intimately related to your life and reflect back at you your history and in a strange sort of way. And this is where, this is part of the fascination. It's not just where the lines lead, but how they affect you, impact you. And I tell you, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I went back to Svati Hosteen just recently, and I haven't put the video, I haven't even made the video. I've got all the segments. And the reason why is because the central point of the video will be, if I dare do it, my reaction to going into the church on the hill, which is a Marian church, but it actually has strange imagery there where Jesus is actually a baby firing lightning, like Perun is the Slavic god of the sky with his lightning weapon. So he's little baby Perun, and Mary is actually Merkosh, the mother goddess. But the Christians see, Jesus and Mary. The pagans see Perun and Merkosh. And I think, although I've yet to prove definitively that the Templar line nodes there with multiple other type 4 lines, at least 4. So it's really, really powerful. And it's been used as a site of veneration for the last several centuries. So it's really powerful. And I went in and I decided to do something rather odd. It just took me, spur of the moment thing. There's a Czech magician called Franz Barden, and he taught a particular approach to magic. And he called one aspect of it pore breathing. And so what you do is when you're meditating, you imagine your body as a sponge and you breathe in energies and you breathe out unwanted energies. So it's a sort of form of meditation and magic. And since I was stood directly in the center of the node of all these lines and I could feel this energy, I decided to close my eyes and meditate. And then I had this bright idea, let's pore breathe it. Well, I thought I was flying. I thought I was levitating. I had to open my eyes and balance myself. I absolutely felt like I left the floor. And when I went out, and I had to go outside for fresh air because it just blew me away. And I'm crying, tears. I mean, like just streams of tears. And I videoed myself, and I've watched it back, and I don't know whether I want to put it up because it's kind of too personal in a way. But on the other hand, I do, because I want to show people that, you know, the impact that this can have, you know.
I would urge you, if you can bring yourself to share it, then if you're prepared to be vulnerable and allow that to be shared, then actually what you're doing is you're connecting to the real essence of the point of all of this stuff. And there's a lot of power in what you've just said and what you can share in that video when you make it. So, but that is, I completely understand why you wouldn't want to share it. Well, yes, it is embarrassing, and yeah, you do open yourself to the idiotic trolls. You know, if you get any of them on your channel, then I got some numpty saying when I opened a video by saying, you know, I would never have thought that I would cry at a book about quantum physics. I had the troll going, "Cry? You're crying? What are you doing crying? You're a man for FFF." You know, and it's like, so, and that wasn't even me crying. That was just talking about it. So I get the vulnerability thing, but if you can, that would be awesome, because this is why earth energy is so important, because the reason that you were crying, as you well know, is because it was connecting you at a very deep, very source orientated level. Your spirit, your soul was connecting to the essence of something far greater than you have experienced in the physical form. You've experienced it in your soul form, as we all have, but that is the essence, and that's the power. And that's why, you know, you've got the nodes. That's why you've got churches on nodal points, because it's a spiritual experience. This is not, you know, this is not playtime. This is really, really important stuff, and it is about the fabric of reality.
Yeah.
Earth, that this level of earth energy that you were connecting to there at that point, that's what it's about. And that is why it is, when any dowser goes out and starts to, when the management are allowing you to tune in and to start to explore the network, the World Wide Web, if you want to call it that, at the level that they are allowing you to explore it at, because you're developing and you're following a train of thought, and they can see that you're developing and your vibrations changing and all those other kind of platitude sort of expressions, you will find that the places you are taken by the energy lines that you're following are very intimate places. They will track and pick off the places that are relevant in your life, in your history, bearing in mind that your history is a story. Your current experience of being a human is a story, and your future that doesn't yet exist, or it might exist in many multiple forms, who knows, is also a story, but you are not the story. And what you're picking up on is the fabric that tells the story, that enables you as a story being to live the story moment by moment by moment by moment. So that's the essence of what you're doing, and why it is so important, because there's no way that this ancient knowledge wasn't known by those in charge.
Yeah, I mean, now I've just actually, I just did a trip to Germany, and I was almost all day on a train, or several trains, and so I took the book, you know, what's it called? The one where Hamish and Mr.
Oh, so Son and the Serpent. That one?
The one where they're tracking the lines.
Yeah, Son and the Serpent, or the Dragon, the Dance of the Dragon.
No, it must be the Son and the Serpent.
Son and the Serpent was the original.
I'd read it maybe 2 years ago, right? When we first started talking, I think I just about read it, and I read it again, and it was a different book, a completely different book to me. You know, I could. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. Yeah, that's right. Okay, got it. And I never picked up any of that subtlety the first time I read it. You know.
No, exactly. But this is about you and your relationship to the management, right? It's exactly what it's about, because your relationship to the management is your reality, formed by the earth energy in which you live. And it's not lines, there are lines, yes, because those are concentrated patterns of, but it is a field of earth energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you say, you tune into the 90 pace wide ones, and that's what and then you'll keep finding them, because you're getting the programming going. It's, whether you want to look at it to say, well, it's the management saying, yes, okay, well, you opened up that door now, yeah, there you go. Or it's whether it's your human bias that's going, yes, well, I've got those now, I know where those are, and there you are. The process is such that you will tune into them. But the real essence of the story, which is what I was trying to get you to open the door on a few years ago, was, what does this mean for me? What does this mean? The actual essence of, when you go into a church and you have an experience like you just described, where you are in tears, what does that mean? What's this? Why is that significant? And we can say, well, it's the soul connection and all of that. But then you look at the environment that you're in, which is the illusory manifest world of the external environment. What are the symbols that you're seeing around the place? What does that mean to you as a creative being, of the same stuff that the earth energy is made of? You are simply a form of earth energy in a personal format. And so therefore it's the search for meaning. What is this? Why? It's asking the eternal question.
I was just about to say, what I'm discovering is meaning, because
yes,
and it's difficult to explain, but I am discovering the meaning to things that I never. It's changing me quite a bit, and I write a Substack now, and I'm all over the place, paranormal and ghost stories, then earth energies and magic, and then maybe some politics. But even on the politics side, it's kind of giving me a sense of meaning beyond. It adds a depth of meaning that I never saw before, and at the same time, it reaffirms all the spiritual truths that you've heard, that you just go, oh yeah, right, Of course possessions mean nothing. Of course we're all one thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't need anything. I just don't. I'd be happy just wandering around in the forest naked with a pair of sticks.
just don't make a video about it. It's
what came to me when I thought I was levitating was, everything is one. Everything everything's all. It's just all part of one big thing.
Yeah.
Even, in the video, I'm like waffling on about even people that you think are bad, like the guy that runs the WEF or Bill Gates. But they're all part of everything. We're just part of one thing, and I forgive them because they're just misled. They're just off on a wrong path. That's all.
They're actually doing their job. In terms of everything, the beingness that is everything at this level and beyond, that we simply can't even connect to. It is all that divine creative force, and again, we start to talk in terms that sound really a bit pompous and a bit like, what the hell are they going on about? But you know what I'm going on about, because it's that beingness, the oneness of everything that you've been searching to try to find and connect to all your life, through all of your training of varying different sorts and asking the questions. And now what's happening is that actually you're connecting to it, and it's like,
yeah.
But it lines everything up. It lines all the ducks up in a row. And the part of the journey that you're kind of experiencing now is acceptance, forgiveness, all of these things that, it's a healing process that you're going through. And part of that is an acceptance that actually this beingness, this supposed chaos that we live in, isn't actually as chaotic necessarily as some of the stories that we might buy into and follow or create for ourselves. Now, the difficulty is the aspect of creating for ourselves, because we are so ingrained in the system of creation, even though we think, well, manifesting, well, this is a new age thing. This is like, oh yes, okay, I get this. But there, I mean, come on, we have been manifesting from the moment we were created as two cells. I mean, even before that, we were creating and being a part of creation, and therefore the experience that we're having now is exactly as it should be. But that is not to say that our free will is sidestepped and out of the question. Free will is absolutely crucial to the experience that we have one step after another in this infinitely creative field that we find ourselves, right? So the way that we interact and the way that we ask questions and the way that we receive answers and our willingness to be open-hearted about something or not affects the reality that we experience at that moment. So when we talk about, in that spiritual way of resonating with the moment of now, and that's all there is, well, that's because that's the way it is, that we are resonating and we are creating in a feedback loop that is instant, as far as we're concerned, between us, our soul self, and the external environment, which isn't really like we perceive it to be anyway. Right?
Yeah, and some of that, I already knew from the magical training and all that kind of stuff. But then, maybe some people get more involved. Maybe some magical people get more involved in ritual magic and stuff and discover it that way. But for me, it's definitely come through tracking these lines and experiencing some of. Sometimes I just giggle because it's just ridiculous. I mean, you're driving along. And you drive, 15 kilometers down a road, and you're looking for a line. It must be somewhere there because it can't. Even if it changed 90 degrees, it's still going to be somewhere in that vicinity. And you're driving along, and you've done like 18, 20 kilometers, and you're thinking, I don't know, it can't. I must have missed it. So you stop the car to look at the map again. And then, I don't know, I get out and I hold the rod. I'm a one rod man now. And I just say, where is the energy line? And the rod swings around and points. And then I'll go, okay, well, is it like, less than 10 kilometers? Yes. Less than 5 kilometers? Yes. Less than 1 kilometer? Yes. Okay. Less than half a kilometer? Less than 50 meters? Am I stood in it?
Yes. Exactly.
It's where I parked.
Exactly. Because your intuitive self, your subconscious, is taking you to that spot. Your conscious, look, the conscious being is a very dense thing. We are very limited in our abilities and our perceptions, which is why we find it so surprising when it's like, oh yeah, shit, I've parked the car in it.
And a number of times that this happens. And now, you're absolutely right. It's just, I must instinctively just know where the line is subconsciously. And
you're a very, very sensitive person. So you would know that. You would know that, and you will underestimate your sensitivity in the same way as that virtually everybody does that is very sensitive and has been doing the work for some time.
It seems like I'm growing. I'm kind of growing all the time as well. Although I have to laugh because I do. My personality always sends me down some blind alley or path, and I'm convinced I'm right, only to be made a complete fool of by the lines.
Well, so maybe
get it right, Gary.
Well, there is that. Well, actually, do you know what though? You kind of said this as well. Look. The thing is, we're talking with you, Gary, is that I know that you know the answers, even if you don't realize you know the answers. That's the whole point, or not the whole point of you, but you are so knowledgeable in terms of your wisdom, but you're still looking at everything from the human perspective.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but that moment in the church wasn't your human perspective that was looking at that emotional, that gave your body the emotional response, which is why it was so unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what you just described to me was you go down, the lines are showing, teaching you a lesson, but but the only aspect of that, and it's not, it's not like it's not like you're egotistical. That isn't, you're a nice guy. You're coming from the right place. But I know what you mean by when you talk about ego, but there's no need there's no need for any of us to think that we're right.
Yeah.
The truth of something is what the meaning is
Yeah.
in that moment for everything and everybody that is aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got this wonderful opportunity right now to just get out and do it, and it is it's very addictive because, I mean, just last weekend I only had a couple of hours, so I thought, well, I'm not going to motor on down the motorway to where I've got to 50 kilometers outside of Brno, because that will waste an hour. Instead, what I'll do is I'll just pick one of these other lines that I know is there and start to track it in my local area. So I ended up driving about 3 kilometers to a village where there's a church. I've made videos on this Trubsco, and I've actually discovered that there's a cross of 2 Type 4 lines there, not just small lines and a big one, but 2 big ones, because one of the big ones I never detected until relatively recently.
Okay.
And actually, it's probably my daughter's line. I just need to prove that. And so I started following that back. And I ended up in this village not more than 12, 13 kilometers from where I live. And I'd never been there. And the lines passed through the Zamek, which is like a stately home rather than a castle. And then I noticed on the map a Hradec, which is a Hradecko, which is like an old fort from Slavic or Celtic times. And I thought, oh, I wonder if it goes there. So I got my backpack on and took a hike. And sure enough, of course, it did. The female line sort of circumvented it, and the male line went right over the top and through it. But you know what? The place was just incredible. When I got on top of this hill, this flat hill, and I'm in that male energy line, and I kind of go automatic somehow. And I just had this funny idea about, I was surrounded by oak trees, all these oak trees. The sun was shining, blue sky, oak trees, this tremendous atmosphere, this sense of history and place and meaning at that minute. And I said something like, thank you, Prun, for showing me this place, because I just felt I had such an affinity with this particular Slavic entity. Now, there was 1 or 2 clouds in the sky, and I need to check my video, because I was actually taking a video at the same time as I was saying this. There was a clap of thunder at the moment I said Perun.
Perfect.
I went, okay, thanks.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Because it is you. You are part of it.
It's just like incredible, you know. Yeah. And it's truly, it's life altering. Yeah, it is.
It is. Yeah. Your exercise of plotting the lines and analysing where they are and why do more keep appearing. Well, I mean, what Rory's doing in terms of trying to map the powerful node points, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. That's excellent. I tend to say to people, when I'm working with the house healing students and they come along and they get really excited by the energy lines and they're doing the similar to you, I tend to say to them, do you know what? I would recommend, there's a time coming soon where you just put it down, because it will drive you nuts. Or if you really are drawn to it, you really just enjoy the experiences that you find there, then do keep following.
I don't mind, I mean, I started out thinking I'd just track this one line, and
that's not gonna.
And it's now become like maybe there's 15 of these things.
Yeah, but what will happen is that they'll all just combine. With whatever area you choose, you'll just get multiples and multiples and multiples, and they'll just join. And what you'll find is that you've got a crisscross selection, and basically you're looking at weaving, and that's because it's the effing web.
And what I'm interested in mapping them for is because I think this comes down to that idea of there might be a subdivision of Type 4 lines.
Right.
because I think that where these lines go has looking for the nodes is also what I'm doing, obviously, because those places are very important. But knowing where the line goes and what it passes through, it's like tracking ley lines. It's like looking for the ley line bit. I think that there's from a scientific academic sort of perspective, there's real value in knowing and looking for the patterns.
Okay, yeah, and I actually, it's people like you that need to do that work to identify what is it, how does it actually
I'm trained
impact.
to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And my brain works that way.
Yeah.
So for me, this gives my life meaning, because not
Right.
only am I discovering all this wonderful spiritual stuff and opening myself up to everything, and it's having I don't know what it's doing to me, but I'm sure it's having a tremendous effect on me as a person. I know it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else is noticing, but I know it is. But at the same time, it has a different level of meaning as well, which is it's satisfying that need to understand at a different level and piece it all together and classify. And
but actually, that the importance of that is actually for future generations, because actually what you're actually part of is the movement to understand our connection to the planet, and it's through Earth energy that we're going to really make that. I'll use that horrible term, quantum leap. When the masses, what a terrible expression, when everybody understands how we are connected to the Earth, that is the moment of the tipping point. That's the big healing.
I got to tell you, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think that if people really took the time to reconnect with the Earth in the way that we are, not suggesting anything by that, other than it's a good thing to do.
Yeah,
I think it would really shift humanity completely.
Yeah,
it would just change the whole meaning of everything.
Yeah.
And it would make all this political nonsense and all the sort of stuff I get sometimes all twisted up about, have you seen what they're doing? It would make it just irrelevant. And sometimes I think, it is, I'm sure that there's an element of initiation here that involves the individual seed of light that is a person, making that transition from being led or being fooled by the material world into a spiritual and seeing the spirituality behind it. And these lines definitely help you with that. So
100%.
After a while, what political parties and politicians are doing and global organizations, well, fine, let them do it, because it's irrelevant. It doesn't. It's relevant, but it's irrelevant. And like you said, they're playing their role as well, because if it was so easy, everybody would get there without any effort.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the friction. It's the friction of reality, which is the play of good and bad, if you want to put it in its very fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so our choices. It's our choices that we make, whether we align and whether we decide to believe in the crappy nonsense stuff, or whether we actually choose to be trying to do our best that we possibly can in as many circumstances that allow us to do that. Which is what healing and self-development is fundamentally, and understanding that you're part of the divine picture, but you've got choices in where you sit within that picture, and that affects your decisions, affect people around you, because it's that wave-like process that reality is built on that filters out, and then the collective gathers on the basis of those waves. It's brilliant.
Tracking the lines rigorously, you do start to realize there's tons of these things, so you have to kind of be selective about which lines you're going to track, right? Because you can't do them all. And so I definitely want to finish the Templar line. And in tracking this Templar line is a good name because it seems to have an affinity with Templar activity.
Yeah.
But more importantly, a particular family in this part of the world, historical family, that were the Lords of Hradec. And everywhere I've found this line noded, it's had a relationship to either the Templars or the Lords of Hradec or both. And that then leads you into thinking, well, what did the Templars know then? And what were these Lords of Hradec about?
Yeah.
And then you see that they were founded to basically protect the ways that pilgrims used,
Yeah.
And then you start to look at their cathedrals and all that stuff and realize that they've built these magnificent sacred architectures on these sites to accentuate the energies.
Correct.
And then you go to a church like John the Baptist in Jindřichův and you look at the strange artwork on the wall, and you start to see in it frequencies. And you are able to decipher one or two of what those frequencies are, discover their solfeggio frequencies.
Brilliant.
And you play them in the church and discover that it steps the energy 10 times. I mean, it's like an amplifier.
Right.
And then you start to realize, well, the reason why maybe the Templar line is important is because I'm rediscovering or trying to rediscover something that they knew.
Yes, indeed.
Talk about in earlier times, they knew the Slavs obviously knew these lines. They used them, they placed their churches on them. Yeah. The Templars utilized these energies for purposes of, I think, accentuating the spiritual experience. And so that I think by following these lines in a rigorous way, you start to see these patterns emerge. And in those patterns, there's a historical aspect that has a different level, it brings a different level of meaning again to what you do.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're down the rabbit hole of the meaning of life, and it's wonderful. I mean, that's fundamentally, it's that actually what you're experiencing, which is so lovely, is really, what made me want to start doing little dowsing workshops all those years ago, because I realized the difference that just looking into the earth energies, the little earth energy centers at sacred sites around, southwest England, what difference that was making to me and my outlook on life. I mean, jeepers, did it change me? And that's all it is. It just takes a little bit of bent wire and off you go.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
A coat hanger.
Yeah, exactly. It's fantastic. Gary, it's been brilliant, mate. I'm really glad we caught up.